Critical thinking has been a topic of conversation we've spent several episodes on here at Life Talks. My name is Dan Burrell. I am one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. And today I'm with our executive producer, Josh Brahm, who is filling in for Ben, who's out of town. Actually, he's out of country. He's in Europe this week. But I've enjoyed these conversations.
Me too.
And critical thinking is so important. You know, there's so many things going on in our culture, politically, just how we navigate the Christian life and whether or not we're thinking in the process. So the tack I'd like to take on this episode today, Josh, is with how can we encourage critical thinking in those who look to us for leadership, particularly our children, but also at the same time, how do we continue to enhance our own critical thinking skills? Because it seems like everything in the culture is telling us to check our brains at the door.
Yes. So it's all about what are you afraid of? What are you passionate about? It's all pointing towards that, and it's not pointing towards critical thinking.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of cultural messages that we're going to have to fight against, even to get people to consider the topic. For instance, this notion of living in the moment, this notion of following your heart.
You only live once.
You only live once, YOLO. And then also just a notion that thinking's too hard. We don't do hard things anymore, and so we go with the flow. We do all these things, but the problem with that is it's more than a cliche. It becomes a way of life for many people.
Yeah,
and also I think we have to question where we're getting our information from today.
Yeah, so maybe let's break some of that down. One of the reasons why I suspect that happens for a lot of people, I've talked to some people that have kind of looked into this, and this idea that your brain is like a muscle. And that it's like kind of everyone uses this, has to use this muscle a lot in college if you have kind of like that typical arc, but a lot of times if you don't end up going into an occupation where you're having to use that a lot, then that muscle, just like any muscle that isn't getting worked out a lot, actually it becomes less effective.
It literally atrophies.
Yes, exactly.
Not that I spend a lot of time in the gym. You can look at me and tell that.
Nor me, right?
But the reality is the times I have gone to the gym, the people I know who are active in the gym talk about resistance training. And resistance training is this notion that we push against atrophy. We push against. So, it's more than just lifting heavy weight, but it's also pushing against things, which creates a form of strength. And intellectually, that is true. It's not enough to consume information, but it's also to analyze information, which is essential to critical thinking. Everything in the modern social media phenomenon, I think, undercuts that. It was interesting. I was talking to our social media director here at Life Fellowship last week, and I was just saying, give me some counts, tell me how we're doing. And I find it difficult, and you're going to laugh at me, but I find it difficult to be super concise when I'm talking.
What? Not
I know,
Dan.
it's such a shocking thing.
You and I have the same problem.
But, and so when I do a video for Instagram we don't do TikTok on purpose, but for Instagram or for even Facebook or Twitter, often I want to do a 3-minute one because I feel like there are essential things I need to. And he tells me this. He said, the amount of interaction we have with a 3-minute video versus a 30-second video is not even close. A 30-second video will get hundreds, and a 3-minute will get scores. So it's just a big difference. And I think that's indicative of it's a generational thing, but it's also just a human nature thing. We're used now to consuming our information in very small snippets, often packaged in an entertainment format. Often almost read to us. I was talking the other day, are we captioning our videos? Because 90% of the videos I watch, I don't watch with the sound on because I may be in bed or I may be in a meeting or I may be, whatever. So if the captions aren't there, I blitz right through them. That's a long way away from when you would sit down to breakfast with a newspaper.
Or like just read books. We'd have to like go to the library and use the Dewey Decimal System.
Dewey Decimal System and the card catalog. And, when I got my doctorate, I was using microfiche to do my research,
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long ago, 30, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But, long form journalism is a dying art.
Yeah.
And the death of the newspaper has contributed to this. But I got to think the other day, I know very little about what's going on in Charlotte, even though I live north of Charlotte. But the reason is because I quit reading the Charlotte Observer a long time before. They basically are in the last throes of going out of business. They're not even publishing daily anywhere. You can't get it delivered to your home and all kinds of things. And there are so many other options on the internet that going to a newspaper website is rare. I also very rarely, I'm not home to watch the local news.
Yeah.
So there are things happening in Charlotte I'm absolutely clueless about. I have to go looking for it to find it.
Where do you go? Like, how do you solve that problem? That problem makes total sense to me.
Well, to me, and I'm an old guy, so if one of the local agencies is involved in something, put something up on Facebook that has an article, I'm likely to click on that article, which I just hate when I'm asking surveys, do you get your news from Facebook? Because I want to say no, but actually sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Or I just remain in the dark.
Yeah.
So when we talk about critical thinking, I think there's some things that we're going to have to be proactive about, or we're going to, as you said, have our brain muscle atrophy.
Right. That's why it's working out maybe for a lot of people at college, is because you were having that resistance training forced on you, kind of like you're at boot camp. You might not be choosing to exercise on your own, but you're going to have teachers that are making you study the other side of different topics and things like that. If you don't continue doing that kind of thing on your own, which, as we've said, and I don't know, the last many episodes, we don't do that a lot. And so we need to get outside that confirmation bias if we want to continue getting that resistance workout that helps get rid of that atrophy.
Absolutely. And this is really essential, I think, in order to develop critical thinking. At least initially, you probably are going to need a partner.
Yes.
The reason I say that is I look back on my college years, 3 degrees and so forth. The professors, I don't remember all the professors' names. I don't remember all the courses I took. But the ones that I use today, the information I learned today, more often than something they said in a classroom. In fact, I remember very little that was said in a classroom, even less that was said in a written lecture of some kind.
Yeah.
But what I remember is being after class in their office.
Yeah.
I remember sitting across the table from them. I remember Q&A sessions, and where there's this back and forth, and you can say, well, let me follow up on that. Oh, no, I didn't phrase that question correctly based on your answer. Let me try it again.
Yeah.
And you get that. That's resistance training. Yeah. It's not just simply accepting it, saying, no, it's more nuanced than that. And sometimes they would do the same to me. I would give them my opinion. I say, oh, no, I hear what you're saying, but... And that but is that resistance that's absolutely essential. So I've got a list of things that, we'll try to cover pretty quickly on things. And I would like for the listeners to be considering, maybe from your posture as a parent or as a teacher or as a mentor or a disciple maker, or just simply as someone who's engaged in conversation. And these conversations, I think, ought to be intentional. Yeah. I love going to lunch with people smarter than me. And I tell them up front, I'm going to be like a CIA investigator. I'm getting out my rubber hose and my bright lights, and you're going to be sitting in a straight back chair. Because I got a lot of things I want to learn from you today. And I tell them up front, that's my intention.
Yeah.
It's how I develop these, this career. And I have a lot of flaws and a lot of faults, and I'm no intellectual genius, but I do love challenging thought and digging deeper.
Yeah.
It's almost like a hobby with
You're
me.
a never-ending learner, and
Absolutely.
That is not true of a lot of people.
Yeah, and to me, the deeper I get, the deeper I want to go. I mean, it's like a bottomless pit.
Yes.
So number one, I think comes to the idea is we've got to learn to ask questions again.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds so basic. But the who, what, where, when, why, how, what is their motivation? What is the context?
Yeah.
I was grading papers last night for an assignment I have, and they're basically analyzing their local church. Yeah. And I can't believe how many of my students will start off the paper and they don't tell me anything about the context. And the first citation I put on there, or first notation I put on there is, tell me about, where's your church? How big is it? What kind of community is in it? What are the demographics? How old is it? If you don't tell me that, I can't assimilate the information in an orderly way in my mind.
Yeah.
Because there's such variety. And so it's like talking to somebody but not knowing what nationality they are or what level of education they have or why are they
you're lacking some context.
Yeah. Why are you an expert? Why are you speaking to this?
Yeah.
And I believe we ought to be asking that question. Just because you're on TikTok and you're pretty does not mean you're the person that should be talking about this.
And that's not an ad hominem attack, by the way. That is a question of expertise. You have people exactly like that on TikTok that everyone just treats as experts, and they are so not. And the real experts who are not on TikTok are just like, what is happening? And it's bad.
And often those people are a little dull, in all honesty, because they're geeks, they're eggheads.
Yes.
And so you have to dig a little deeper to try to get the information. Another one is analyzing the argument itself. So when somebody's presenting a case, I want to know, what is your claim? What is your evidence for that claim? And what's the reasoning? How did you reach the conclusions you reached?
Yeah.
And all of those are important parts of being a critical thinker.
Yeah.
So there's multiple kinds of evidence, but largely there's anecdotal and empirical. Those are, those sounds like intimidating words, but they're really not.
No, they're
anecdotal
not.
Evidence is, I once knew a guy. One time I was traveling and I saw, it's an anecdote.
Yes.
Now, those can be very, very valid to the extent that they're true.
The more of them that you have and things like that, but it
if
gets
you
complicated.
Accumulate a bunch of them and you actually measure them and analyze them with some rules, then they can become empirical.
Yeah.
But so an empirical is what is called an objective study of something.
Yeah.
So by objective, it means opinion doesn't matter, your presuppositions don't matter. Subjective means it's subject to those. Yeah. So if it's like, okay, we only interviewed white men or we only interviewed black women, well, your answers may be very different based on those parameters.
Right.
So those are questions you should be asking. Right. So you say 9 out of 10 people. Okay, let's analyze this a little more.
Yeah.
Remember, they used to do Crest toothpaste. They'd say 9 out of 10 dentists recommend. Well, that tells me something because I'm more interested in what a dentist thinks about toothpaste than I am about a pig farmer.
Yeah.
So that provided me with a little more information.
Yeah.
But I'd also want to know, did these 9 out of 10 dentists get any compensation for participation?
Yeah. And what did they actually mean?
Yeah. Were they saying Crest toothpaste or were they saying toothpaste that had fluoride in it?
Right.
And sometimes, and I am so guilty of this, Josh, sometimes you start asking all those questions, you come off being a jerk.
Oh, yes. This is why no one likes philosophers.
But in my head, in my poor little pea brain, those questions are screaming at me.
Yeah.
Screaming.
You can't turn them off.
Which is why I have a hard time listening to what I call it's inarticulate, but imprecise communicators. And just for the sake of, this isn't political at this moment, but Donald Trump drives me crazy for this reason.
Right.
Because he'll say, everyone's saying, and my first thought, as soon as he says everyone's saying is, no, not everyone. Right. I guarantee you not everyone is saying this. Right. So that bothers me at the very beginning.
There's almost nothing that everybody is saying.
That statement is prima facie false.
Yeah. Yes. On the face of it. Yes.
And then he'll say a lot of people. So many times a lot of people are upset with you, Dan. A lot of people are going to leave the church. A lot of people are going to write a letter. All right. So what does a lot of people mean to you?
Right.
And so that is evidence.
It could be 5 loud people.
It could be 5 loud people. It could be one other person and this person, and they're simply exaggerating because they feel like their argument's weak, so they want to buttress it up with a lie. And in fact, that happens more times than than it actually is true. So asking these questions, analyzing their arguments, where are you coming from? What is the basis of this statement? The who, what, where, why, and when, but also this, how did you reach this conclusion? Then the other thing I think is important is that seek clarification. So when we're engaged in this conversation, which is why conversations are important, we need to kind of have this, I need to know more information. And ask for that. We ought not hesitate in asking, so is this something that happened to you, or did you read a study on this?
Yeah.
Oh, you read a study? Great. Would you mind could you send me the link to it?
Help me find it. Yeah.
Help me find it. Because often it's, I was reading Facebook the other day, or I was reading Insta the other day.
Right.
And again, I read Facebook, I read Insta, but I don't consider that an authoritative source.
Right.
But they may.
Yeah.
And if they do and I don't, then we've got a diversion of conclusions that are going to be inevitable.
Right. Like best case scenario for them, they saw they saw a link to a really great informative link off of Facebook that they found that way, and that might be what they're thinking of. But if all they can remember is, no, I saw it on Facebook, then that's worse than Wikipedia. What does that mean for me?
But I take it to that obnoxious level, and my wife will attest to this, and probably have some choice things to say.
We've all probably had to try to learn how to do this more tactfully.
Yeah, because I'll say, so you saw a link. Excellent. That's progress, right? But where was that link from? So if the link is from, let's say, the Daily Beast, I immediately have a different response than if it was from, let's use something on the other, Breitbart or something along that line. Because I know both those organizations come from a different philosophical point of view. Yeah. And that maybe I agree with one more than the other, but I have to be careful of my own confirmation bias. Yeah. So I need to say, okay, so they're going to be coming from a conservative or they're coming from a liberal point of view. And then that needs to start adjusting how I work through that content. Or it could be a completely invalid. There's a big thing going on the internet today. I don't know whether you're aware of it. The Justice Department has located some formalized Russian disinformation organizations on the internet, and they duped, and they said famous conservative. I'd never heard of any of them.
I'm familiar with at least one of them.
Are you? All right. So, but
I'm not a fan, but I know of him.
So, but that's a critical thinking thing. Yeah. Okay. So, to the extent you at least knew one, I knew zero. So immediately I'm filtering it at a different level.
Oh wait, two. No, they said Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, right? Both of those. Yeah. I'm really familiar with both those. Yeah.
So for you, it's going to have a little more validity, at least because you know who the name is. To me, who knows absolutely nothing about any of the six. So we look at that kind of stuff, and again, that's evaluating the evidence, scrutinizing the quality, the relevance. Yeah, are these the right people to be speaking to this?
There's if I can jump in, like when you're going back and forth with someone about links, because I think another thing that can happen is sometimes people will just kind of just dump links on you and just be like, look, I've got these 5 links, and if you just kind of read these, then you'll know everything. But then sometimes they're like 100 pages long. It just kind of becomes like this ineffective thing. And so sometimes I can just be like, tell me what the link is saying. Yeah. What is your argument from the link? If you can put this, I might not ask them to put it in a syllogism form, but basically just help me understand what you're getting from that and what is that evidence. And sometimes you can get them to kind of summarize it. One other thing I want to add, when you're in dialogue with people, one of the things that we've taught at Equal Rights Institute is that we want to ask a lot of clarification questions, like all the time. You don't know what the other person's thinking, intending, feeling, so you want to ask, help me understand what you meant by this, and that. There's a thing that some apologists do recommend doing that we don't, which is what we call ending an argument with a question mark, where you're basically making an argument, but technically it's a question. It might sound like, well, it seems like if X is true, then wouldn't Y also have to be true? Like it would have to be, right? Like that kind of thing. It's always leading somewhere, and that often shuts people down because they can tell that you're leading them somewhere. They might not know where you're going. And so we just kind of had to try to drop most of those and just be very, very just clarification, detective mode. And then when it comes to actually if when it comes time to counter the argument, then we'll just counter it. It's so here's why I'm not convinced. And I'll just kind of spell it out and then invite them to come back at me. And that's a difference that we found to be helpful.
One of and I don't remember who it was, but years ago when, it was real popular to have the Phil Donahue, even Oprah Winfrey used to do this, Sally Jessy Raphael, that format of talk show. There was one, and I can't remember her name, but she would periodically stop and say, so what have we learned so far? And that's a good way of kind of clarifying. Yeah. Okay, these are the facts in play this moment. Now, I'm not saying I agree with them, but these are the statements, the concrete issues we've got to work around.
I think it's always helpful sometimes just take a pause and just kind of have a meta moment. Let's have a little bit of an analysis about what's going on, and here's what I hear you. And it also gives you a chance to then clarify. We talked about this in a previous episode of rephrasing what they said. Here's what I hear you basically saying in a paragraph, and then let them correct you if you got them wrong. And then the next part of your conversation is going to be way better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, doing it in a way that doesn't make you appear to be obnoxious, and often I'll say this, I'll sit down and say, I'm a lifelong learner. I am like to have conversations with people I know I'm not going to agree with them 100% because I always wake away learning.
Gold.
And when we do that, it disarms.
Yeah, they're not expecting it, but it also gives them a reason to play.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not about winning or losing, it's about playing the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I mean by that is it's so boring if you're talking to functionally a bot that you know that no matter what you input is always going to output the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've got two lifelong learners come together, then it's like people might actually change. And then it kind of gives people a lot more buy-in. It's less of a game and more of like a real exercise towards finding truth.
Yeah. And that brings me to the next point, which is consider alternative perspectives.
Yes.
Truly try to figure out where they're coming from.
Yeah.
From where they're coming, if you're going to use correct grammar. But the issue is often we're so intent on changing minds that we forget that we're also there to learn. Yeah. Because if you learn where their point of view, their perspective, then you're going to be able to tailor your arguments. Because none of us want to give an argument that's irrelevant or bogus.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. So when working with with students or with my own children or that, I think one of the things to do is to have conversations whereupon you have dialogue over issues that they're going to be confronted with, and you may play the devil's advocate.
Yes.
Yeah, and tell them up front, let's play a game. Okay, you're going to be on this side, I'm going to be on that side. Ben and I love to do this on podcasts sometimes. So you're going to be X, I'm going to be Y. And let's go through it and let's see what we can learn. This is why it's really important when you get in a car with one of your kids to turn the radio off, turn the podcast off, and take the screen out of everybody's hand. It used to be that, you'd have this confinement of 20 or 30 minutes while you're commuting somewhere where you either talked or slept. But today, now we get all this entertainment. And I'm as guilty as anybody of it.
Yeah, me too.
But how many meaningful conversations do we lose simply because we put other noise that's of less importance into our ears and into our way? So we're out of time already on this episode, so we're going to take another one and finish up this list. But folks, if you're listening to this, again, one of the reasons we do this is to analyze things. Sometimes we get emails and messages from people that misunderstand what we're trying. I'm not preaching a sermon here. I'm really not. I'm not even particularly trying to convince you of anything other than I want you to think. I'm really confident on this. If you know what truth is, and that's what I try to preach, and if the Holy Spirit lives in your heart, that He will be a better guide to truth than I ever will be. He'll make better applications than I ever will be. So I'm more intent on teaching you how to think from a truth perspective than I am in trying to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah. That's critical thinking, and to me, that's intellectual leadership. And I hope you understand our posture. We're not trying to be argumentative, and this is not a pulpit. It's a conversation.
And if you think we're wrong, use critical thinking and help us see why we're wrong.
So we can make changes and adjustments as well.
Yeah.
So, and then every once in a while, it'll be a situation where we say, we're just going to fundamentally disagree on that. And that's okay. Yeah. We can still be friends. We can still love each other. We're just going to see it differently. Let's find some other things to talk about. And that makes us be able to live peaceably among all men, which is what Scripture tells us to do. Well, thanks as always for listening to us here at Life Talks. Thank you, Josh, for another great conversation. I hope that if you'll take a moment and give us some feedback, I got a great list of ideas from one of our listeners, Clayton, last night that we're going to be implementing. Just gave me a bunch of ideas for future podcasts. Feel free to share those with you at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Share us on social media and catch us next time here at Life Talks.